Hi everybody, welcome to Knitting with Frogginette. I'm Lisa and I'm a knitwear designer who focuses on baby and children knitwear. Today I wanted to do something a little bit different instead of the regular sort of vlog, podcast episode that I do where I usually sort of show you what I'm working on and discuss my current knits. I wanted to do a little bit of a Q&A. The other day on Instagram, I took some questions about the business aspect of knitwear design. And I got a lot of questions, and I wanted to sort of see if I could answer at least the first part. So, without further ado, let's look at your questions. So one of the most frequent questions that I received was, how did you start your knitwear design business, and when did that start? So it's not exactly a straightforward answer. I guess that the first pattern that I put up for sale on Ravelry was in November 2009. So quite a while ago. And the first pattern I released was this one, the baby tiered coat and jacket, I called it, because there was two options, was the coat and then the cropped version jacket. Very simple. So this one I lined with red gingham. Made these little buttons too. So this was the first thing I ever released. And the way that happened is that, let's see, so I started knitting as, really a big hobby of mine, I would say sometime in 2005. Of course, I had learned how to knit a long time before that. Didn't really like it as a kid. Then taught myself again around right after 9/11. Actually, I was living in New York at the time, and I think it helped me sort of relax. And that's when I started getting into knitting. And then, let's see, we moved to California. I moved to California, met my boyfriend, who's now my husband. And that's when I really started knitting quite a lot. I knit from the Stitch and Bitch books. I loved Stephanie Japel. I just started really knitting like a lot. And then Ravelry was there, and that was so exciting. And then little by little, let's see, after that we moved to Washington, D.C., to Maryland, very close to Washington, D.C. And there I had a friend whose friends were having babies, left and right. And she saw that I was knitting, and she told me, oh, it would be so nice if you could knit and I would pay you, and, I would give my friends hand knit baby things. And so, I was trying to find patterns of things that I liked. She wanted something a little bit classic, a little bit French, like that would, like, simple but not boring. And at the time on Ravelry, I just couldn't find the things that I wanted to knit. And so I kind of improvised a few things. And one of the things that I improvised was this little coat, this tiered coat that I just had this idea of this sort of classic but whimsical coat for little girls. And I just wanted to keep it real simple, and use bulkier yarn so that it would be kind of a quick knit and it would be worth my while in terms of knitting. So anyway, after a while, people were asking me for the pattern of the coat after I put my project on Ravelry, and I was like, I have no idea how to write a pattern, like how does one do that? And so I tried to read some books and like try to research, ask questions on Ravelry, and basically at the time there just weren't that many resources. I mean, this was 2009. So I kind of just gave it a try, got it test knit, and the first version wasn't quite right with sizing, so I worked on it again, added more sizes, because the first time I wrote it for like 2 sizes, I didn't really know. So I put a lot of extra work into it. I got it tech edited because I was told that was important. And eventually, I was happy enough with the quality of the pattern that I felt it was good enough. And, my test knitters were super helpful. And I just decided to put it for sale. And I hesitated a lot. But eventually I thought, you know what, like, I've worked really hard on this. I think this is a good pattern. Like, I'm just gonna see, maybe if it doesn't work, then I'll remove, I'll put it for free or whatever. I really had no idea if anybody would buy it. But I was really surprised that as soon as I put it on sale, it did really well. Like, I still remember waking up the next morning and having all these sales that had come in. And that was really surprising. But on the other hand, I thought, oh, well, this is really fun, this will be kind of like a little extra, a perk of, because I wasn't expecting anything. Like, this was really just a little hobby thing. And I wasn't even thinking I would make more patterns at the time. It was just because this one, people seemed interested in. So, I kept working at my regular job, and I just had this one pattern in my store basically forever. And then what happened was, we moved to Germany in January of 2012, and by then I had a kid, and I had knit him a lot of things, other people's patterns, and so I felt like I had a lot more experience in terms of reading patterns, understanding how other people phrased things, and when I arrived in Germany, I didn't have a job. It seemed like unlikely that I would easily find a job because we don't live in a place where there's that much work available, especially for, someone like me whose German wasn't very good. And so I thought, okay, well, I have to be with my my baby at home anyway, so maybe I'll really give this, pattern design business a go for like a year, while I have to be with him anyway, because I couldn't put him in daycare for a while. So I really gave it my all at that point, and I released quite a few patterns, and I just wanted to see if it was gonna work out enough to be on the way to be like a sustainable activity for me, or if I was gonna have to find another way to make money. The next pattern I released was the Baltic baby sweater, which is this pattern. This pattern I made for my son, and it's quite well worn now. But I thought really hard about, what would be practical, what would be fast and easy, and what I felt like I could handle in terms of pattern writing. And, I released, what else did I release that year? I also released, this cardigan, which was Storytime cardigan that he also wore a ton. That had the little cute elbow patches. And then that same year, I released this guy, the latte baby coat, which had 2 versions, with or without a hood. And that was my first sort of real year of, trying my best, and, trying to do things very professionally, it was really hard. I remember taking these pictures and with very bad light conditions, and like they weren't very good at first. Like I felt like I learned so much that year, because I always felt like the first pattern that I released, the tiered baby coat, I always felt like, I got really lucky, which I did, because I don't think there just weren't that many sort of modern baby knits at the time. There were a few that were really cool, and I did knit them for my son. Like I think Karina Spencer had a really cute pattern that everyone was making. There were a few, but not that many. So I wanted to see, if I could sort of reproduce that kind of success. And I feel like that, yeah, that first year I definitely did. I was very surprised, but especially with the latte coat, like it really did very well, like immediately. And it was also, there was some luck involved in that this quite well-known blogger made a version of that coat for her daughter. And, of course, she had a huge readership at the time. I think she still does. And that helped a lot, of course, like with visibility. But yeah, basically all the designs did well, but the best sellers by far were the two coats, like the tiered coat and the latte coat. So yeah, so that year I thought, okay, now I have enough of a good start to really keep building on this business. And the lucky thing was that at that point, after that year, my son started going to daycare. So of course I had like a lot of time to work on this, and I did. So another question I got was, what are your best-selling patterns? So as I mentioned, the tiered baby coat and the latte coat are, basically keep selling really well, even now, even like 10 years later or more. And I also have other patterns that sell really well. This pattern that you may have seen is Entrechat. So this shrug with a very kind of unusual construction, super fast knit. This one sells very well, and I now have versions for different types of yarn, different yarn weights. And then more recently, this pattern really took off at some point. I can't really identify when. It always did well, but it was kind of like those background patterns in terms of sale that sold really consistently, but wasn't like one of the best-selling ones. And like in the past year or two, like it really, I think it's probably, if not the bestseller, then the second bestseller is the boy sweater, which I have here in this color, and also I made another version here. Yeah, it's bigger. So, it's hard to hold. Anyway, yeah, so these are the patterns that are my best sellers. More recently, I mean, I have a few that I just released in the past year. There's also others that sell very well, like my hyphen cardigan, my 11s cardigan. Like, I can always sort of count on those sales from these best sellers. Like, it's pretty consistent at this point. So another question I got that I thought was really interesting is, how do you manage your time to be able to run your business while being a mom? Well, that's quite tricky. So normally my kids are in school, right? Or in daycare when they were little. Like, I live in Germany. This is not a problem here. And, I'm very fortunate in that way. It just so happens that the most sort of growth I had in my business were actually times where my kids were at home. In particular, when my daughter was born, and I also had my son at home for a while. It was just, I guess I put sort of this almost desperation in my work, where like when I could work on my patterns, I would just do it like as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible. I just really try to make each second count. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. Like, it's just the way it happened for me. It's much better now, obviously, that I have many hours ahead of me and I can think uninterrupted and everything. Of course, it makes it easier. Of course, it's an advantage if you're trying to build a business. It's hard to do certain things, especially, for example, grading, working in Excel, where, you have to do math and you have to focus, and it's really difficult to be interrupted sometimes. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, yeah, the obvious answers are, try to do the tricky, brainy parts when your kids are sleeping. So that might mean staying up at night a little bit or getting up earlier. And then maybe do the sample knitting, when you're around them and you can still interact with them and play with them. I mean, it's a great occupation in that you can raise your kids and enjoy your kids and be around your kids while doing it, because you can kind of choose your time, choose when you're going to do each thing. But it can be frustrating, I mean, for sure. And I really don't have any particular amazing tricks for that. One thing that can be very difficult, especially if you have a business, your own business in general, but especially if you also have children at home, I think is the feeling that you just can't win. Like, if you're spending a lot of time with your kids, you're always thinking, oh, like, I'm not spending enough time on my business. Or if you're trying to like really work hard on your business, you might think, oh, maybe I should spend more time with my kids or my husband, my partner, or I should spend more time on self-care. Like, that's a big one for me. Like, I tend to forget to just stop and do, have other hobbies and, just go for a walk with a friend. That's quite difficult. And that's my big, I guess, challenge, especially in the past couple of years. It's trying to find a balance where when you have a business, you can always do more. You can always put more pressure on yourself. Oh, I need to release more patterns. I need to do this, I need to do that. And it's just unending. I mean, so it is. And also, you just kind of, there's a sense of self-worth too that's tied into your business, especially these kinds of creative businesses where it's easy for others to kind of not take it that seriously. I mean, how many times have I sort of dreaded that question of what do you do, where I start explaining and then I kind of see the assumption and the assumptions in that person's face, like that I'm kind of sitting on the couch eating bonbons and just knitting all day and like really not doing anything, that I'm calling it a business and it really isn't a business. It's like you get paranoid sometimes. And even even with your friends, it can be hard where like, just because you might be more flexible in terms of your time, of when you can meet up and things like that, they might kind of assume that you just don't really work, or it's just really tricky. It's just something, like I had a friend, I remember when I hadn't seen him in a long time and we were emailing again, and I used to work in journalism and I used to do, documentary filmmaking and all that. And, when he asked me if I was still doing that, and I said no, and actually I'm so much happier. Like, I was explaining, what my new business was, and his answer was, oh, that's a shame. Like, kind of, oh, like your talents, or, your brain is wasted on this, or like that was kind of the subtext. And it was really kind of icky, and it sort of feels like you have to justify yourself a lot. I mean, maybe that's just me and my environment, but it's, with any creative business, it's tough. You have to navigate all these things, and for me, I don't have sort of and the issue that a lot of knitwear designers have that are trying to have a business or do have a business is that sometimes it's just not bringing in a lot of money. Like it's not an easy career in terms of, you know, financially. So that can be hard too. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. I could go on and on about all this, and I will probably in a separate episode, because I see that I've been, you know, chatting for quite a while, and I still have a million questions that I need to answer. So I think I'm going to take a last question from my list, and then I'll do a part 2 at some point soon. Let's see. How did your business evolve over time? How did things differ when you started versus now? So I would say that, well, the way it evolved over time is that I'm more and more treating it like a business. Like when I've released my first pattern, really, I wasn't expecting anything from it. I wasn't thinking, it was just a hobby. And I think that's the case for a lot of knitwear designers. When they just kind of start, they test the waters and they see, and maybe they just keep releasing one pattern every year just like that, and it's not really a business, right? But that's a completely different thing. When something needs to be a business, then, you know, you need to treat it like a business. That means you have to constantly learn how to do everything, you know, like accounting, you know, taxes, you know, customer service, customer support. That's a huge thing. That's like a huge part of the business. So I would say that unfortunately over time, well, there's more and more admin stuff and, you know, less purely creative stuff, but that's, I mean, that's normal. Like any job, you're going to have things that are the fun parts and things that are not the, you know, not as fun. Another way that things have changed compared to when I started is there's a lot more competition. I mean, every day I'm amazed at the high quality of designs that are coming out. Like, it's amazing. Like, people are so talented, and I'm always amazed. People are getting really good at everything, you know, like just not just designing, but also like photography, like branding, like everything looks so slick. I mean, that's changed a lot. I would say that, yeah, I mean, there's a steep learning curve in general in this business, but especially lately, I think, because there's also all the social media, the marketing, like there's constantly new platform. I mean, that you have to learn, and that are constantly changing, which is very frustrating. So when I started, it was really just like you put your pattern on Ravelry and that was kind of it. I mean, I had Craftsy for a while and Etsy, but really now I feel like you really have to work a lot harder to be seen. And I think you need a lot more business savvy in a way. You have to be more intentional about a lot of things. It's tricky, and there's a lot of resources out there, which does make it easier, I think, for people who want to start in this business. There's like groups on Ravelry where people give so many amazing support and advice for, you know, newer designers. There's like, you know, YouTube channels where people give advice on how to manage a creative business. Like, if you want help and advice, you can find it nowadays, so that's good, right? But yeah, it's trickier. I mean, there's so many people who are trying to do the same thing. So yeah, establishing yourself is probably tricky nowadays. Like, I'm fortunate in that I sort of established my customer base a long time ago. I have very loyal customers, and I'm very grateful for them, of course. And it's just like the word of mouth worked really well, and I still think it does. That's very important, to just put out a quality product no matter what. You know, don't try to cut corners. Yeah, I mean, my business evolved over time in that I'm trying to be more systematic about things. I'm not very good at it though. Like, I'm the kind of person who, if I try to plan things too much, then something in me rebels against it. So it's counterproductive. So I give myself goals, but I keep them flexible. I'm always letting myself sort of decide on what I'm going to work on day by day, depending on my mood. You know, I don't like working for third parties at all, because that is counter to the reason why I'm doing this job. Like, I used to work in documentary filmmaking, where it's very stressful. You always have these deadlines, and I don't want that anymore in my life. And I'm so grateful I found a job where I set my own deadlines and my own challenges, and that works really well for me. Not to say that third party submission for designs is not the way to go for many people. I know it is. And I actually think it's a great way of learning how to do this, because you have access to amazing professionals, you know, amazing, you know, tech editors and editors and photographers, and it can be a great way for a newer designer to really learn the ropes, I think, and having, you know, the guarantee that you'll be paid something for your work, because if you're self-published, then yeah, there's never any guarantees. Yeah, so I would say things definitely are different now. I'm more interested in like work-life balance nowadays, and I try to stop myself from, you know, feeling competitive or trying to do too much. I'm stepping back. I'm trying to focus more on community as well. Like, I try to, you know, feature designers, like knit other people's designs, you know, like try to feature them when I can. I try to, you know, give a little bit of advice if people ask me. Yeah, I mean, I feel a little more secure, so it's easy, of course, to do this. I would probably put a ton of pressure on myself if I was still worried about whether I would be able to pay my bills, you know. So, yeah, tricky these days, because yeah, all this competition, and tricky to work with kids at home, or if you have another job, like your sort of real job, you know, but you're still having this business that you need to nurture and take care of, and you probably feel like you never stop, you know, working. And I never had that. Like, I went from working on, you know, my other career, and then had the opportunity to really give it a shot right away. So I'm in an unusual and fortunate situation. So yeah. So I think I'm going to wrap it up for this first part of the Q&A about the business side of knitwear design. I have many more questions I haven't answered. Keep them coming, you know, like just go ahead and add comments here. And if you want me to talk about particular aspects of the business of knitwear design, go ahead. And I will do my best to address them in the next, you know, few weeks. And let me know if you enjoyed this, if I should keep doing these kind of Q&As. Yeah, next time I think I'll do more of a regular kind of podcast where I'll show you the latest stuff that I knit. So stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, thank you so much for all your questions. I hope it was fun. I hope you learned something or that it was informative. And I will see you soon. Bye.